stand in front of the wild goose and lay there more dead than alive. The neighbors gathered round and speculated on this production of the deep, whether it were fish or flesh or a compound of both, commonly called a merman. The kind-hearted Turnus van Giesen, seeing that he wore the human form, took him into his house and warmed him into life.
By degrees, he showed signs of intelligence and uttered sounds very much like language, but which no one in Communipaw could understand. Some thought him a Negro from Guinea who had either fallen overboard or escaped from a slave ship. Nothing, however, could ever draw from him the account of his origin.
When questioned on the subject, he merely pointed to Gibbet Island, a small rocky islet which lies in the open bay just opposite Communipaw, as though that were his native place, although everyone knows it was always uninhabited.
In the process of time, he acquired something of the Dutch language. That is to say, he learnt all its vocabulary of oaths and maledictions, with words sufficient to string them together.
Thunder and blitzen!
Thunder and lightning were the gentlest of his ejaculations.
For years he kept about the wild goose, more like one of those familiar spirits or household goblins that we read of than like a human being. He acknowledged allegiance to no one, but performed various domestic offices when it suited his humor, waiting occasionally on the guests, grooming the horses, cutting wood, drawing water, and all this without being ordered. Lay any command on him, and the stubborn sea urchin was sure to rebel.
He was never so much at home as when on the open water, lying in a skiff or canoe, entirely alone, fishing, crabbing, or glabbing for oysters.
And would bring home quantities for the larder of the wild goose, which he would throw down at the kitchen door with a growl.
No wind nor weather deterred him from launching forth on his favorite element. Indeed, the wilder the weather, the more he seemed to enjoy it. If a storm was brewing, he was sure to put off from shore, and would be seen far out in the bay, his light skiff dancing like a feather on the waves, when sea and sky were in a turmoil, and the stoutest ships were fain to lower their sails.
On such occasions, he would be gone days altogether.
How he weathered the tempest, and how and where he subsisted, no one could define. Nor did anyone venture to ask, for all had an almost superstitious awe of him.
Some of the Communipaw histermen declared that they had more than once seen him suddenly disappear, canoe and all, as if they plunged beneath the waves, and after a while come up again in quite a different part of the bay.
Whence they concluded that he could live underwater, much like that notable species of wild duck,
Commonly called the hell diver.
All began to consider him in the light of a foul-weather bird, like a mother carries chicken or stormy petrel, and whenever they saw him putting far out in the bay, in cloudy weather, made up their minds for a storm. The only being for whom he seemed to have any liking was Jan Jos Vanderskamp, and him he liked for his very wickedness.
He, in a manner, took the boy under his tutelage, prompted him to all kinds of mischief, aided him in every wild hear him, scare him free.
Until the lad became the complete scapegrace of the village, a pest to his uncle and to everyone else.
Nor were these worthies confined to that land. He soon learned to accompany old Pluto on the water. Together these worthies would cruise about the broad bay, neighboring straits and rivers, robbing the set nets of fishermen, landing on remote coasts, laying waste orchard and watermelon patches. In short, carrying on a complete system of piracy on a small scale.
Piloted by Pluto, the youthful Vanderskamp soon became acquainted with all the bays, rivers, creeks, and inlets of the watery world around him. Could navigate from the hook to spiting devil on the darkest night, and learned to set even the terrors of hell gaped at defiance.
At length, Negro and boy suddenly disappeared, and days and weeks elapsed, but without tidings of them.
Some say they had run away and gone to sea.
Others jocosely hinted that old Pluto, being his namesake in disguise, had spirited away the boy to the nether regions.
All, however, could agree on one thing, that the village was well rid of them.
In the process of time, the good Tunis Van Giesen slept with his fathers, and the tavern remained shut up, waiting for a claimant. For the next heir was Jan Joost Vanderskamp, and he had not been heard of for years.
At length, one day, a boat was seen pulling for the shore from a long, black, rakish-looking schooner that lay at anchor at the bay.
The boat's crew seemed worthy of the craft from which they depart. Never had such a set of glasses, swaggering varlets, landed in peace of Communipaw. They were outlandish in garb and demeanor.
And bareheaded by a rough, burly, bully ruffian, baked fiery whiskers, a copper nose, a scar across his face, and a great flounderish beaver slouched on both sides.
In whom, to their dismay, the quiet inhabitants were made to recognize their early pest, Jan Joost Vanderskamp.
The rear of this hopeful gang was brought up by old Pluto, who had lost an eye, grown grizzly-headed, and looked more like a devil than ever.
Vanderskamp renewed his acquaintance with the old burghers, much against their will, and in a manner not at all to their taste. He slapped them familiarly on the back, gave them an iron grip of the hand, and was hail fellow velvet. According to his own account, he had been all the world over, had made money by bagsful, had ships in every sea, and now meant to turn the wild goose into a country seat, where he and his comrades, all rich merchants from foreign parts, might enjoy themselves in the interval of their voyages.
Sure enough, in a little while, there was a complete metamorphosis of the wild goose from a quiet, peaceful Dutch public house. It became a most riotous and uproarious private dwelling.
A complete rendezvous for boisterous men of the seas who came here to have what they called a blowout on dry land. They might be seen at all hours, lounging about the door,
Or lolling out of the windows, swearing amongst themselves and cracking rough jokes on every passerby.
The house was fitted up in so strange a manner. The hammocks slung to the walls instead of bedsteads. All kinds of furniture of foreign fashion. Bamboo couches, Spanish chairs, pistols, cutlasses, and blunderbusses suspended on every peg.
Silver crucifixes on the mantelpieces, silver porringers and candlesticks on the table, contrasting oddly with the pewter and telfware of the original establishment.
And then the strange amusements of these sea monsters.
Pitching Spanish dollars instead of points. Firing blunderbusses out of the window.
Shooting at a mark, or at any unhappy dog, or cat, or pig, or barn-door fowl that might happen to come within reach. The only being who seemed to relish the rough battle was old Pluto.
And yet he led but a dog's life of it, for they practiced all kinds of manual jokes upon him.
Kicked him around like a football.
Shook him by his grisly mop of wool.
And never spoke to him without coupling a curse by way of adjective to his name. And consigning him to the infernal regions.
The old fellow, however, seemed to like them the better the more they cursed him.
Though his utmost expression of pleasure never amounted to more than the growl of a petted bear. Then his ears are robbed.
Old Pluto was a ministering spirit at these orgies of the wild beast, and such orgies as took place there. Such drinking, singing, whooping, swearing.
With an occasional interlude of quarreling and fighting.
The noisier grew the revel, the more old Pluto applied quotations, until the guests would become frantic at their merriment.
Sometimes, after a drinking bout, they sallied forth and scoured the village,